morning and welcome to my channel. A few people asked me to demo how I made this jig, and this is a bookmaker's kind of a corner miter jig. So what you're gonna need is some chipboard, and here's the original one that I made, and then I'll demo one. And the one I'm gonna demo is gonna be a little bit bigger in size. And I'm using some pre-purchased chipboard. This is graphics chipboard, and I will link it below, but you can also use like the back of your watercolor pad or several. You want something kind of thick because there's a weak point in it that needs the reinforcement. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab my ruler. I'm going to grab my Tim Holtz ruler here, and I'm going to mark 1 inch in on 2 corners. I'm just going to line that black line at the 1 inch mark, and I'm going to just mark that in. And this is going to be kind of my guide. And you will need some sort of a craft knife. I use my finger blade knife, and of course I'll link that below. But we're going to cut out all of this. And what I like to do is I like to take and grab something that'll help me not cut beyond my lines, and because you know you've got a tiny little space you're going to be working with there. So I'm just going to take a piece of my mint tape, and I'm just going to tape it right along that line so I know where to start with my cut. And I'm just going to take my ruler, and this is just a Fisker's finger knife, and I really need to put a fresh blade in here, but this blade still works. And I'm going to use the metal side of the ruler, and I'm just going to make multiple cuts until it's cut through. I don't want to try and push really hard on it, because then it's going to move on me. Because as you can see, I'm holding down that little piece of chipboard with both the ruler and my fingers. So now I'm going to move my guide up to the other side. Again, so I don't cut beyond, but that I get a nice crisp corner there. And I'm just going to take my knife and do the same, 2, 3 or 4 cuts. Try and hold your knife as straight as possible, because one thing that I notice happens to me if I don't is that, you know, I've got a little kind of a little mountain going there instead of a flat edge, and you want that flat edge. Okay. So what I need to do now is I need to mark this off. And I'm going to start at a 1/4 inch, but I need it to be just a little bit less than a 1/4 inch. So I'll show you. And that's where your weak point is. And I'm going to start with I've got a triangle ruler. And I do that so that I can use the straight lines on it to line up along the left edge there of the little jig. And so I'm going just a little under 1/4 inch, and I'm going to mark it. And that I'm going to be cutting off as well. And I'm going to go ahead and use this little ruler as well to kind of make sure that I stay lined up while I'm doing my cut. Because you want this as accurate as possible. Yeah, I know, I realize it's a handmade tool, it's rudimentary, but if you want to buy one on Etsy, they're like $20 for an acrylic one. And I mean, I'm okay with that, but if I can make my own, I'm gonna. So see, I'm still making sure everything's lined up, and I moved it down so it's the weak point is about just a little over 1/8 inch. Because what I'll be using it for is mitering corners when I'm making like my journal covers and stuff like that, and to the point where you might take apart an old book and it's got a little bit more thickness than chipboard. But you can see that that's the weak point, and it's very delicate, so we're going to do some reinforcing. And I'm going to start with just a piece of 120-pound accent opaque white paper as my first layer. So I'm going to have 2 layers on each side of paper. And I'm just going to glue it down to the paper and then trim off the excess. And I do like to leave a little leeway on each side. I am using my Reptile Adhesive. You want to use a good strong glue. I know that the multi-matte medium is also very strong because I want as much reinforcement as I can get there on that weak point. And you don't really have to do any of this. This is for decorative purposes. Honestly, sorry, somebody flew into my throat. And I'm just going to kind of lay this on the paper and glue it down. It doesn't, I mean, you want to make sure that there's any excess glue you get off of there. Giving it a good press. Make sure it's nice and tight on there. And see, this is where you can check your corners or your sides on each side to make sure that they're at that perfect 90-degree angle. And I'm going to just cut off this excess, and this is 120-pound paper, so it's pretty heavy. I'm just going to take my scissors and kind of just cut along this edge here so I don't have as much to trim off. Still want it making sure that it's good and stuck down, and then using my knife to make sure that I'm cutting my paper flush up next to that part of the chipboard. This is that corner point right there is the point where you don't want anything to hang over. And of course the sides. So you don't want anything to hang over at all. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up this video while I complete that. Okay, I've got both sides covered now with the white paper. And so it's still going to need a little bit more. And what I want is I want decoration. So I'm going to grab my Tim Holtz paper pad. I'm going to use the abandoned paper pad. And I'm going to use the same green because I like it. It's pretty. And what I'm going to do is basically the same exact thing you saw me do a minute ago. I'm going to cover both sides, and I'll show you the covering of one side, and then I'll, speed up the video or skip to, once that's done. So I'm choosing the part I want, and I am going to leave some leeway there. A little bit. I mean, we're talking a minute, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit off camera there, but just wiggle room. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to put the glue down and glue both sides on. Okay, now that I've got both sides glued on, time to grunge it up. So I'm going to grab my Distress Ink, and I'm going to use the Vintage Photo here today. It's probably my favorite, what you'll see me use most, but I have my two grungers in my little holder that I made, and I will put a little card up in the top, so if you want to go and see how I made these holders. You want to make sure, see, when you're doing that, you want to make sure that your paper's not hanging over anywhere. So I'm just kind of going to take my knife and trim. If it won't trim with my knife, then it's likely it's going to be fine. And so I'm just going to ink up these edges here so that I'm not seeing white paper and raw chipboard. It makes it look more like an old-fashioned tool. And I like to use the flat foam for grunging up edges versus the domed because it just gets more area quickly. So I can see there that I've got some paper, overhang paper. So I'm just going to take my Tim Holtz scissors and trim it off. All right, let's try it with the knife, see if we have any better luck there at that very edge. There we go. So I'm just holding my knife flush up against, and by the way, I'm using a cutting mat, in case you wondered. There we go, all nice and flush. And now I'm just going to do some grunging of the actual surface. Give it that old antique-y feel, although I don't know about the color, but that's okay. I mean, I love the colors, but I don't know if those would be considered antique colors. Maybe they would. They are now. And what I'm doing here is I just I've got a piece of scrap here, and I want to cut about 1/8 of an inch strip. And these get tricky, cutting these strips, because you know your ruler doesn't have anything to lay on. Things want to move around on you, and I'm going to use my Tim Holtz ruler, and you can see that I'm using the first dotted line as my mark, and it's a very, very tiny cut. And I put another piece of chipboard under there just to kind of level out, and see, now it wants to move on me. But what I'm doing is just trying to kind of level out the where the ruler's laying. And I'm going to make a couple of cuts, and then I'm going to give up and try and cut it another way, because it's just such a tiny spot. And I probably could have done it from the other end, but I didn't. So I'm just keeping my knife in that groove and trying to cut. And see, that's the pitfall of not having some sort of a guide, is you can end up going off. I'm just going to bend it back a little bit, and then I'm just going to take my Tim Holtz scissors and I'm going to cut the rest of the way through. That way I know it's nice and straight. And it's basically going to get glued along this edge here, making sure that nothing is hanging over either side. So you see why I needed to make a thin strip. So once I'm happy with my strip, and I did make the strip longer, I will trim it off, which will be best. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it. And I'm going to be using a distress paint. I'm going to use the Twisted Citron distress paint to paint it, because it kind of goes with the paper. I wonder why. And I'm not going to do a perfect job of painting it. I don't want it to be perfect. I'm just going to coat the whole thing and then let it dry and continue on. So here you see me painting it. And again, I'm just kind of roughly painting it. I'm not doing 2 coats or anything like that. And I just left a tiny edge on the end so that I could handle it. And I am getting the sides as well. And you don't really need to paint the back side, but I don't want a glob of paint, you know, kind of raised up, preventing me from being able to glue it down. So I just paint the whole thing, and then I will set it aside to dry. And I'll be right back once that's dry. Well, maybe I'll be right back. Maybe I'm staying. Nope, I'm going to be right back. All right, now we've got our little strip nice and dry. Now I'm just going to glue it down. And I want to make sure, you know, that there's no little globbers of anything on there that's going to prevent it from sitting flat. I'm going to use my strong Reptile Adhesive. I'm just going to kind of spread it out on there, because I don't want a bunch oozing out. I don't want to take a chance of, you know, covering my area that is going to be the actual tool part, which is the miter jig. So I'm checking it, grabbing this little triangle, the little part that I cut out, making sure that nothing is touching, and now it comes off. That's all right. The glue's still wet. Just making sure that I still have a perfect corner there before I push down on this to make it good and stuck. And you see how I'm checking it? I'm just kind of giving it a little push right there. Then checking the top, make sure it feels flush, and then I'm just going to go ahead and push it down. And once that's down, and I'm going to flip it over and give it a really good push to make sure that glue's good and stuck, I'm just going to take my knife, I'm going to trim off the excess. Just like that. Okay, so we basically have our piece here. And again, you don't have to do all the decorating, but you know, I mean, who doesn't love to have their craft room with their tools all cool looking? I'm going to grunge up that painted piece. Just dabbing on the glue or the ink. And this is Distress. Let me see. It looks like I'm using ink, yeah. I'm going to grab some of my little snippets, ephemera. I think these are field notes. And pick out a couple of things here just to decorate it with. And I ran out of little pointy fingers. I'm sure I have the stamp and I could make one real quick, but I'm not going to because we're doing a video here. So I'm going to go with the mushrooms. And I'm going to grunge up the edges of those. And now you can see why my fingers are so dirty, because this is what I do. But no worries, I washed them. Just put a little glue on there and just glue that bad boy right down. And then I'm going to grab, I've got a little words pad, the Chit Chat. I'm going to pick out a word. Doesn't matter which. I mean, you know, I like it to be partly related to what I've made here. So I'm going to grab this little one and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on it. I like to have glue, it's a sticker, but I like to have glue as well. I'm just going to glue it down and it's going to move around on me, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Anyway, let me just turn down my computer here so that you don't keep getting interrupted by my email. And let's see, do I want one other thing on here? I do. And let's see. Yeah, we'll leave it like it is. You can put as much stuff on there as you want. You can collage it on it, whatever. Just don't impede your inside and outside corners. So now I'm just going to demonstrate how this works, just in case, because I did have people ask me, well, what's the point of this? And I'm going to show you. So I'm going to take a little piece of chipboard. And you know what? I want it smaller. I don't want to waste all that chipboard. Yeah, let's use this leftover corner here. And I'm going to glue it down about 1/2 inch from each side. On something this small, it could be shorter, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to glue it down. And make sure it's good and stuck. It doesn't take long for the Reptile Adhesive to dry, by the way. It doesn't have a dry time of now, though, so that's the only thing about the multimedia mat is there's not a lot of wiggle room unless you put a whole lot of it down. So I'm just go ahead and trim that piece off so that I can show you. And what we're going to do is we want to miter those edges in. So I'm going to use my little tool. I'm going to put it butt up against that corner, and I'm going to use my knife to miter off the corner there. You know, you can do this by eyeball. It's not a big deal, but I like it. I like to have the little tool. It's very handy. So I'm going to fold over one side and I'm going to burnish it down with my bone folder with the flat edge, and then I'm going to push in on that little piece right there. And that's why you didn't want to really leave it that long, but again, for demonstration purposes. Now I'm going to fold this side over. Use my bone folder to get it nice and flat. And there, your mitered corner is perfect on both sides. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more from my channel, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to be alerted each time I upload a new video. Stay tuned. I have another jig video coming. And here's the two that I made, the small one and the big one. I thank you guys for watching and stopping by, and I hope that you have an awesome day.